Lawyers of Reddit, what is the most unethical thing you have seen someone do for a lawsuit and won? I started out working for a commercial law firm advising companies on environmental compliance. We had a client who was a large oil and gas distributor which owned a contaminated site in a populated area. My boss advised the client to transfer ownership of the site to a newly incorporated limited liability company with no assets. That way, when the government ordered the site to be remediated, the client wouldn't be liable for the cleanup. I left not too long after that. Edit, I'm not based in the United States. Yes. Lawyers exist in other countries too. He told OJ to struggle when putting on the glove. Some also claim that OJ stopped taking his arthritis pills which made him take on water and caused swelling in his hands. Then his legal team goaded the prosecution into making him try on the gloves. Not condoning it, but that's smart as hell for a strategy if true. When I was working as a public defender in the Detroit State Court, I routinely saw cops lie about the existence of video recordings of an event. The law says they have to have the cams running when they make a stop. But in all the cases I saw, not a single cop was ever able to produce a video. Either the video had malfunctioned, been accidentally deleted after the event, or the camera was broken. It was a weird place to work. The cops very much viewed the defense lawyers and the legal process as their enemy. I'm sure there were a lot of unjust outcomes as a result. A friend of a friend woke up in a hospital. He has no idea what happened, but he was brought out of an induced coma from a bike wreck. The car he ended up under was owned by a lawyer. The lawyer and a cop forced the doctors to get the guy out of a coma long enough to sign a statement when no family was present. The lawyer never mentioned to the doctor that it was he who was driving and not a person he represented. The lawyer then went on to sue for damages on his car by the guy and his bicycle. Not a lawyer, but some old wench made a very sudden stop without cause and almost caused an accident. My mom got hella ugly about it, and so did the lady in front of us. My mom had to point out the traffic cameras to get her to shut up and drive off. No accident, but she almost caused one on purpose. I heard people do this because if you run into them you might get fined for not keeping enough distance. We had one lady slam on her brakes in front of us after the light had turned green and we rear-ended her. She got out of the car and started yelling about back pain. It was clearly fraud, but it was still an expensive $700 settlement. People like this make the world a terrible place. Not a lawyer, but my dad sued his previous workplace for reasons. Long story short, the company's lawyer kept bringing up suggesting he was guilty of domestic violence. He wasn't. At all. She just wanted to make him look bad. Now if you Google his name, domestic violence comes up. I thought that would qualify as slander or something, but I guess not. I don't know how to make the little shrugging guy, and I'm not going to go find it. While you may not have legal recourse, you can hire an SEO company to get those results removed or less likely to be seen when you Google your dad's name. Look around East Texas and Louisiana. We had an attorney who won quite a few of his cases high on coke. He died a few years ago from an overdose. In-N-Out Burger sued my company for using their name. We have a similar name and are in a state that doesn't have In-N-Out Burger. And we are in the automotive industry. In-N-Out Burger purchased a body shop so they could tell the court that they too were in the automotive industry. Mind you, they bought it after they sued us and were looking like they were going to lose. We won the lawsuit. That's actually hilarious. Most attorneys are really ethical. Generally the most egregious ethical violations are lack of diligence or maintenance on a case and general laziness. Now, some lawyers will do some shady bullshit like trolling burn wards for cases and things like that. Occasionally you will hear about a person withholding something that should have been disclosed. But the scummier happenings are what some people will do to get a client and hold a client. Hourly billing attorneys often get a reputation for going through unnecessary crap to milk the retainer and help hit their minimum billable for the year. Lawyers can be really unethical, dealing with other lawyers out of spite. It isn't to win but just to be an asshole to lawyers and make their lives miserable. Lawyers can be really cool and ethical, or they can be petty assholes. Kind of like any job in life. For a year I worked for the most unethical attorney I have ever met. Here are my top 2 stories. He took on a client that was injured at work. He sent him to a doctor that he would refer to as a whore. Since the attorney normally does defense work, the doctor came back saying the injury was clearly not work related. The attorney called the doctor to inform him that he represented the employee and not the employer in this case. The doctor then wrote a report that the injury was clearly work related. One afternoon the attorney's assistant ran into my room and said I need to go to the courthouse right now to defend the attorney in a traffic case. Attorney told me he had no run-ins with law enforcement before, had never been ticketed before, and would just like to get supervision. I go in front of the judge and present this information and I get him supervision. I go back to the office and curiosity got the best of me. I searched his criminal record. Yeah. Turns out he had another outstanding speeding ticket and you could see his mugshot for domestic violence. Oh. And he tried to fine me $5,000 for going to a doctor's appointment on my lunch break. Yup, at that point I literally walked out. Full stop. Lawyer here. I'm proud of what I do, and believe that I do it the right way. I act in the best interest of my client and work to get them the best possible result within the parameters of the case. The reality is that our role is adversarial, and so to the other party you're the bad guy. That's not hard to live with. It's understandable. It's kind of like being a Bears fan and thinking Aaron Rodgers is the devil. The hardest part about the profession is dealing with the reputation given to all lawyers in the field because of the actions of a small percentage of the legal community. This post is evidence of that unfortunate reputation. Please remember that if you read 1000 unethical stories here, it comes out of a pool of millions of cases handled throughout the country every year. Not a lawyer, but would Amber Heard's actions count? She was the one who abused Johnny Depp. She even went as far as cutting off half of one of his fingers. She admitted to this and she said that she did it in hopes of advancing her career. Everything you mentioned are all claims made by Johnny Depp in his $50 million lawsuit against Amber Heard. Amber Heard has also made domestic violence claims against Depp during the whole Me Too era. As to the truth of the matter, I obviously don't know. I suspect that they both were nasty to each other and were both perpetrators and victims of DV. Won a shitty mom full custody of her kids by proving that she was actually 17 years old when she got married and wasn't legally allowed to enter into a prenuptial agreement. Edit. This is just the plot of Liar starting Jim Carrey. Some people got their feathers ruffled. Lawyer for 12 years here, specializing in estates and trusts. My client was challenging the will her husband left behind, giving the wife and son an equal split of the sizable inheritance he left behind. The son used to have an opiate addiction, but had been in treatment and a program, and had been clean for over 5 years. My client hired a private investigator who befriended the son and pushed him to start using again, selling him a few pills on hidden camera. The wife ended up using the video to successfully convince the judge her husband was under the impression their son was clean when he wrote the will. But since the video showed he still had a serious drug problem, the will could be challenged and he couldn't be trusted with his inheritance. She got the entire estate, and the son ended up dying a few years later from an overdose. Bumped the back of a Chevy Malibu at a red light back in 1993. Lady claimed she had to be on disability as a result. My car was a Honda CRX. The compression thingers in the front bumper weren't collapsed, which indicated it was less than 10 km/h impact. In court I was shown a photo of their car and it looked like they backed into a tree. Central dent and huge. She won the case against my insurance company. No idea how to this day. Mom had her 7-year-old daughter lie on the stand. Mother claimed bodily injuries from a motor vehicle accident. She forced her 7-year-old daughter to testify at trial. The mother coached the daughter to say that the mother was in the car at the time of the accident. It became very apparent that the mother was not in the car at the time of the accident because the mother couldn't recall where the accident occurred or which parts of the vehicles were damaged. My colleagues told me about the time he and one of the most powerful lawyers in town were in court. The opposing lawyer was even more bad asshole than this guy. He had to find a chink in his armor. So upon the opposing lawyer opening his briefcase, lawyer number 1 notices it was full of shoe shine stuff. The guy's obsessed with his shoes. Before the trial, lawyer number 1 greets the opposing lawyer. And while shaking hands, he accidentally stepped on his foot. Shrink said he never had to try so hard not to erupt in laughter in court. Opposing lawyer was so flustered because the trial had started, and he couldn't shine his shoes, that he lost the case. Lawyer number 1's son is my current attorney. Obligatory, not a lawyer. But my parents got caught up in a slimy lawyer's talons. Basically, they had carpet installed in their house in 2005. Paid in cash. Got a receipt. And went on with their lives. 7 years later, they get a letter from some law firm saying the company they'd had install their carpet never received payment and would press charges if they didn't pay up. My dad, being the paranoid duck he is, had kept the receipt and said he'd see them in court. He did some research. Found out what the attorney can and can't do in this situation. And also found out that the attorney had been working with the flooring company for years, accusing paying customers of not paying and collecting excess money from them under threat of lawsuit. Fast forward to the court date. Dad shows up knowing his rights, with the receipt stating exactly how much he paid and when. Attorney has nothing except a copy of the invoice for my dad's payment that he leaves in his folder the whole time. Not only does the attorney break almost every rule of court possible, he completely slanders my dad, calling him sketchy looking and dishonest even though the receipt is literally right there in front of him. Insists that the receipt is fake despite having a copy of the invoice. Real shitty stuff. My dad lost that case. Before anyone had even left the courtroom, the attorney walked up to chat with the judge, who asked if they were still on for brunch tomorrow. Because it was a super small circuit, this dude had been able to buddy up to a judge to the extent he was allowed to do basically whatever he wanted and still win his cases. A year later my parents sued the attorney for misconduct and requested an out-of-circuit judge, who essentially told that slimy schmuck to sit the duck down and shut the duck up when he tried to pull something against the rules. They won that case. I just listened to the latest episode of the Case Files True Crime podcast and some lawyer was defending a guy who was up on kidnapping and rape charges for an attack on 2 female hitchhikers. During the trial the lawyer went to a gay and les bar, he was gay himself apparently, and saw the 2 women, who were set to be witnesses for the prosecution the next day, engaging in intimate contact. So the next day on cross-examination brought up their les relationship knowing that the conservative jury would instantly find their credibility questionable. He then managed to confuse one of the victims into admitting that the 6 might have been consensual. This managed to get the rapist off the hook. Oh. And the rapist ended up becoming one of Australia's most notorious serial killers named Ivan Millet. This man in Georgia sued himself because he threw a boomerang and it came back and hit him. I'm not a lawyer, just some girl who viewed a lawsuit in English class. Basically some guy found a leg. Yes, a real leg, and sued the owner of the leg to be able to keep the leg. Turns out finders keepers is an actual law and the dude who found the leg got to keep it. Not sure if this counts, but someone at my school tried to sue the school for blocking a pagan website and claim it as violating the First Amendment. Needless to say, it didn't go through.